Money can buy a penthouse in Manhattan. It can buy a team of ruthless lawyers. It can even buy silence, or so they thought. When Sophia Kensington married the billionaire heir Alexander Kensington, the world saw a fairy tale. But behind the closed doors of their $10 million estate, the fairy tale was a horror story. She was pregnant, fragile, and terrified. One night, the shouting stopped, and the tragedy began. Alexander thought his money made him untouchable. He thought Sophia was just a helpless orphan with no one to fight for her. He was wrong. He forgot one thing. Sophia had a father, and he wasn't just an old man. He was a sleeping lion who would burn the world down to get justice for his daughter. Watch until the end, because the justice served in this courtroom will leave you speechless. The charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art was the event of the season in New York City. Flashbulbs popped like lightning storms as Alexander Kensington stepped out of the limousine, his hand firmly gripping the waist of his wife, Sophia. To the cameras, it was a gesture of affection. To Sophia, it was a vice, a warning. "Smile," Alexander whispered, his lips barely moving, his voice a low, terrifying hum against her ear. "You look like you're attending a funeral, Sophia. Do not embarrass me." Sophia forced the corners of her mouth upward. It was a practiced reflex. She was 24, heavily pregnant, and draped in a red velvet gown that cost more than her childhood home. Her blonde hair was pinned back in an intricate chignon, revealing the diamond earrings that felt heavy, like shackles. "I'm trying, Alex," she murmured, her hand instinctively going to her stomach. She was 7 months along. A boy. An heir. That was all Alexander cared about, the continuation of the Kensington legacy. Inside, the air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne, and the city's elite mingled under the Temple of Dendur. Alexander, the CEO of Kensington Global Logistics, was the son everyone orbited. He was tall, with the kind of sharp, devastatingly handsome features that made people forgive his arrogance. "Alexander, magnificent turnout," boomed Harrison Fordyce, a banking mogul and one of Alexander's oldest allies. "Harrison," Alexander nodded, his grip on Sophia tightening slightly. "You know my wife, Sophia." "Glowing as always," Harrison said, though his eyes lingered on the faint, expertly concealed bruise on Sophia's upper arm, just visible where the shawl had slipped. He looked away quickly. In their circle, you didn't see what you weren't supposed to see. Sophia felt a wave of nausea. It wasn't just the pregnancy. It was the fear. Earlier that afternoon, Alexander had thrown a crystal tumbler against the wall because the maid had ironed his shirt with a barely visible crease. A shard of glass had grazed Sophia's ankle. She was walking on a cut, bleeding silently into her designer heels. "I need to sit down, Alex," she whispered after an hour of standing. Her back was throbbing. Alexander's smile didn't waver as he looked at his peers, but his eyes turned to ice as they flicked to her. "You will sit when we leave. Stop being weak. It reflects poorly on the family strength." "Please," she begged softly. "The baby." "The baby is a Kensington," he hissed. "He isn't weak. Unlike his mother." He abandoned her near a pillar to discuss a merger with a senator. Sophia leaned against the cool stone, closing her eyes. She thought of her father, Robert. She hadn't spoken to him in 2 years. Alexander had isolated her completely, convincing her that her father, a retired, grumpy mechanic from Detroit, was low class and unwanted in their shiny new life. Alexander had even blocked Robert's number on her phone. Dad would hate this, she thought, a tear escaping before she could catch it. He would hate him. She didn't see the woman approaching until a shadow fell over her. It was Jessica Sterling, a socialite known for her venomous gossip column. "Trouble in paradise, darling," Jessica smirked, sipping a martini. "I heard Alex has been spending a lot of time at the Plaza Hotel recently, and not alone." Sophia stiffened. "I don't know what you mean." "Oh, please. Everyone knows about his assistant, Tiffany. The redhead? Legs for days?" Jessica laughed cruelly. "Don't worry. You're the brood mare. You carry the air. She carries his attention." The stress hit Sophia like a physical blow. The room spun. She stumbled, knocking into a waiter carrying a tray of red wine. The glasses shattered. The dark liquid splashed across the front of Alexander's pristine white tuxedo shirt as he returned to her side. The music seemed to stop. The room went silent. Alexander looked down at the stain, then at Sophia. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "Get the car," he said to his bodyguard, his voice deceptively calm. "Alex, it was an accident." Sophia started, trembling. "Not a word," he snapped. "Not one word." The drive back to their penthouse in Tribeca was silent, the kind of silence that rings in your ears. The chauffeur, a man named Thomas who had been with the family for years, kept the partition up and the radio off. He knew. Everyone on the staff knew. But the Kensington NDA, non-disclosure agreement, was ironclad. Speaking out meant financial ruin. When the elevator doors opened directly into their foyer, Alexander didn't wait. He grabbed Sophia by the wrist and dragged her into the living room. "You clumsy, pathetic embarrassment!" He shoved her. Sophia stumbled, her center of gravity off due to the baby, and fell onto the plush Persian rug. "Alex, please, calm down. The stress is bad for the baby." "You don't get to talk about the baby," Alexander roared, pacing the room, tearing off his wine-stained jacket and throwing it on the floor. "I was closing a deal with Senator Higgins, a deal that would triple our shipping routes in the Pacific. And you clumsy cow, you made me look like a fool." "I felt faint. You wouldn't let me sit," Sophia cried, trying to push herself up. "Because you are weak." He loomed over her. The smell of scotch was on his breath now. He must have downed a drink in the limo. "I gave you everything. I took you out of that filth in Detroit. I dressed you. I fed you. I gave you a life your mechanic father couldn't dream of. And this is how you repay me? I never asked for the money. I just wanted a husband who loved me." "Love?" He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "I bought you, Sophia. You're an investment, and right now, you're a liability." He kicked the ottoman next to her, sending it skidding across the room. Sophia flinched, curling into a ball to protect her stomach. "Don't you dare curl away from me." What happened next was a blur of violence that Sophia would relive in her nightmares for the rest of her life. He didn't just yell. He grabbed her by the hair. He shook her. And when she tried to crawl away, desperate to get to the panic room she had never used, he shoved her. It wasn't a gentle push. It was a forceful shove near the top of the sunken living room stairs, 3 marble steps that led down to the seating area. Sophia screamed as she lost her footing. She twisted in the air, trying to take the impact on her shoulder, but she hit the marble floor hard. Her side slammed against the edge of the coffee table. A sharp, tearing pain ripped through her abdomen. "Alex!" she gasped, clutching her stomach. "Alex! Something's wrong!" Alexander stood at the top of the steps, panting. For a second, regret flashed in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by self-preservation. "Get up!" he ordered. "Stop being dramatic." "No. Alex. Blood." She pulled her hand away from her dress. The red velvet was darker now, wet and warm. Alexander froze. He stared at the blood. He didn't rush to her. He didn't call 911 immediately. He pulled out his phone and dialed his lawyer. "Charles," Alexander said, his voice shaking but calculating. "We have a situation." "She fell?" "Yes. She was drinking. She was clumsy. I need you here. Now." Only after he hung up did he call for the ambulance. Sophia lay on the cold floor, her vision blurring. The pain was blinding. She felt the life inside her, the little kicks she had grown to love. Slow down. "Dad," she thought, her consciousness fading. "Daddy, help me." 300 miles away, in a cluttered, grease-stained garage in the suburbs of Detroit, Robert Bennett was working on a 1967 Ford Mustang. It was 2:00 a.m. He couldn't sleep. He hadn't slept well in 2 years, not since his little girl, his Fire, had walked down the aisle with that shark in a suit. Robert was a man of few words. He was 60 years old, with hands that looked like leather and shoulders broad enough to carry an engine block. To the neighbors, he was just Bob the mechanic, a nice guy who fixed radiators for cheap and kept to himself. They didn't know who he used to be. They didn't know why he had a safe in his basement that contained files from the Department of Justice, classified level. They didn't know that Bob was formerly Robert Bennett, the relentless special prosecutor who had taken down the Chicago mob in the 90s before retiring into anonymity to protect his family after his wife passed away. The phone on the wall rang, a harsh, mechanical sound in the quiet garage. Robert wiped his hands on a rag and picked it up. "Bennett." "Mr. Bennett?" The voice was female, professional, but strained. "This is Dr. Oris Thorne from Mount Sinai Hospital in New York." Robert's blood ran cold. He dropped the rag. "Sophia. She is in critical condition, Mr. Bennett. She was brought in 2 hours ago. There was an incident. Is she alive?" Robert's voice was a growl, low and dangerous. "She is alive. She's in recovery from emergency surgery, but—" The doctor paused. "Mr. Bennett." She lost the baby. The placental abruption was too severe due to the trauma. Robert closed his eyes. He gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. His grandson. Gone. "Trauma," Robert repeated. "What kind of trauma?" "The husband, Mr. Kensington, stated she fell down the stairs while intoxicated," the doctor said. Her tone suggested she didn't believe it. "However, the bruising patterns. Mr. Bennett, you are listed as her emergency contact in her old medical files, which is how we found you. Her husband is currently trying to block us from contacting anyone. But I thought her father should know." "He's there?" "He's in the waiting room with a team of lawyers and private security. They are controlling access to her room." "Dr. Thorne," Robert said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Keep her alive. I'm coming." Robert hung up. He didn't pack a suitcase. He walked into his house, went to the basement, and opened the safe. He bypassed the stack of cash. He reached for a small black book containing numbers of people who owed him favors. People in the FBI, people in the press, and people who broke legs for a living. He dialed a number. "Yeah?" a groggy voice answered. It was Detective Miller, NYPD, an old friend from the task force days. "Miller, it's Bennett. I need a pickup at JFK in 3 hours, and I need you to get a unit to Mount Sinai to sit on my daughter's room. Nobody goes in, nobody comes out, especially not Alexander Kensington. Bob, Jesus, I haven't heard from you in a decade. What's going on?" "War," Robert said. "War is going on." He grabbed his old leather jacket and walked out the door. The mechanic was gone. The prosecutor was back. The VIP wing of Mount Sinai Hospital was quiet, save for the hum of expensive machinery. Alexander Kensington sat in a private waiting suite, sipping an espresso, brought to him by a terrified intern. Across from him sat Charles Vane, the Kensington family's fixer and attorney. Vane was a reptilian man with slicked-back grey hair and a suit that cost more than most people's cars. "The police report is filed," Vane said smoothly. "Accidental fall. We have the toxicology report from our private lab showing she had alcohol in her system." "But she didn't," Alexander said, looking out the window. "She didn't drink a drop." "The report says she did," Vane corrected him, raising an eyebrow. "And Dr. Aris Thorne, the one asking questions? I've already contacted the hospital board. They're going to reassign her. We'll get a doctor more, sympathetic to the Kensington donors." "Good," Alexander muttered. "And the funeral for the child?" "Private, quick, cremation. No autopsy needed if the cause of death is clear from the fall." Vane paused. "The narrative is simple, Alex. Sophia was unstable. Postpartum depression set in early. She drank, she fell. You are the grieving husband. The public will eat it up. Sympathy stocks will rise." Alexander nodded. It was clean. It was efficient. It was a lie. Suddenly a commotion erupted at the nursing station down the hall. "Sir, you cannot go in there. That is a restricted area," a nurse shouted. "I'm not a visitor. I'm her father." A deep voice boomed. Alexander stood up. "He's here? How did he know?" "I'll handle it," Vane said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. He walked into the hallway, flanked by two of Alexander's private security guards. Coming down the hall was Robert Bennett. He looked out of place in his faded jeans and leather jacket, his face unshaven, his eyes red-rimmed but burning with intensity. Behind him, however, walked two uniformed NYPD officers. Vane stepped in front of Robert. "Mr. Bennett, a tragedy, truly. But I'm afraid Alexander is not up for visitors, and Sophia is sedated. You'll need to leave." Robert didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. He walked right up to Vane, towering over the lawyer. "Get out of my way," Robert said. "This is private property," Vane sneered. "Security, remove him." One of the private security guards reached for Robert's arm. In a move that defied his age, Robert grabbed the guard's wrist, twisted it, and slammed the man face first into the wall. The guard groaned and slid down. The second guard reached for his taser, but the NYPD officers behind Robert stepped forward, hands on their holsters. "Back off!" Officer Miller barked. "This man is immediate family." Vane looked at the police, then at Robert. He realized this wasn't just a mechanic from Detroit. The way Robert moved, the way the cops deferred to him. This was something else. Robert leaned into Vane's face. "Tell your client that if he sets one foot in my daughter's room, I will break every bone in his hand. Then we'll see how well he signs checks." Robert pushed past the lawyer and entered Sophia's room. The room was dim. The beep of the monitor was slow. Sophia looked so small in the bed, her face pale, tubes running into her arm. Robert approached the bed slowly. His heart broke. He reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. Her eyes fluttered open. They were hazy, filled with pain. She tried to focus. "Daddy?" she rasped, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm here, Fire," Robert whispered, tears finally spilling onto his rough cheeks. "I'm here. I lost him," she sobbed, a sound of pure agony. "I lost the baby. He hurt me, Dad. He pushed me." Robert took her hand. He kissed her knuckles. "I know, baby. I know. He says nobody will believe me. He says he owns the truth." Robert's face hardened into a mask of stone. He looked at the bruises on her arms. He looked at the emptiness where her baby bump had been. "He owns money, Sophia," Robert said softly. "But he doesn't own the truth. And he definitely doesn't own me." He squeezed her hand. "Rest now." When you wake up, the world is going to be different. I promise. The weeks following Sophia's discharge from the hospital were a masterclass in media manipulation. Alexander Kensington didn't just want to win the legal battle. He wanted to destroy Sophia's credibility so thoroughly that she would never be able to speak again. Headlines splashed across the New York Chronicle and the gossip blogs. Billionaire heirs wife in rehab secret, and the tragic mental decline of Sophia Kensington. Alexander's team released carefully edited photos of Sophia, looking disheveled from months prior, photos taken when she had the flu, captioning them as evidence of her substance abuse spiraling out of control. They painted a picture of a saintly husband trying to save a drowning, ungrateful woman. Robert moved Sophia to a safe location, a small, unassuming cabin in the Catskills owned by his old partner, Detective Miller. It was off the grid. No internet, no reporters, just pine trees and silence. Inside the cabin, Sophia sat wrapped in a quilt, staring at the fire. She looked hollow. The physical wounds were healing, but the emotional ones were festering. "They hate me, Dad," she whispered, looking at a newspaper Robert had foolishly left on the table. "Look at this. They say I threw myself down the stairs to get attention. They say I killed my own baby." Robert snatched the paper and tossed it into the fire. The flames licked up the face of Alexander Kensington. "Paper burns, Sophia," Robert said, pouring her a cup of tea. "Lies burn. The truth is harder to kill. It's made of steel." "But we have no proof," she cried, her voice cracking. "The cameras in the house malfunctioned. The staff won't talk. It's his word against mine, and his word is worth billions." Robert sat down opposite her. He placed a heavy, rusted iron box on the table. It was his old case box from the 90s. "I didn't tell you everything about what I did before I became a mechanic," Robert said quietly. "I didn't just fix cars, I fixed problems, big problems. And I learned one thing: arrogant men always leave a trail. Alexander thinks he scrubbed the scene. He thinks he paid off the staff. But he made a mistake." "What mistake?" "He underestimated the help." Robert stood up. "I'm going back to the city tonight. You stay here with Miller's wife. Don't answer the phone. Don't go outside." "Where are you going?" "I'm going to find the ghost." Robert's investigation didn't start in a law library. It started in the gritty underbelly of Queens. He tracked down Maria Gonzalez, the head housekeeper of the Kensington estate. According to the official report, Maria was on vacation in Mexico when the accident happened. Robert knew that was a lie. He had pulled her credit card records, a favor from an old contact at the bureau. Her cards hadn't been used in Mexico. They had been used at a bodega in Astoria. He found her living in a cramped basement apartment, terrified. When she saw Robert at her door, she tried to slam it. He blocked it with his boot. "Maria," Robert said, his voice gentle but firm, "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm Sophia's father." Maria began to weep. "They told me they would deport my son. Mr. Vane, he said if I spoke about what I heard, my Mateo would be on a bus to the border the next day." Robert felt a surge of rage, but he kept it unchecked. "Mr. Vane is a bully, but I am a nightmare. If you help me, I guarantee your son's safety. I have friends in immigration. I can get you permanent status. But I need the truth." Maria trembled, inviting him in. "I wasn't in the room," she whispered. "But I was in the kitchen. I heard the screaming. I heard him hit her. And I saw something else." "What did you see, Maria?" "After the ambulance left, before the police came, Mr. Vane came to the house. He went to the security room. He took the hard drive from the server. But he didn't know about the backup. Robert's eyes widened. There's a backup? Mr. Alexander installed a hidden nanny cam in the living room 3 months ago. He wanted to spy on the staff to make sure we weren't stealing silver. He forgot about it. It records to a separate cloud server. Do you have the login? Maria went to her purse and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. I wrote it down because he made me monitor the cleaning staff. I never told Mr. Vane. Robert took the paper like it was a holy relic. This was it. The smoking gun. Before the trial, there was a mandatory settlement conference. It took place in the glass-walled conference room of Vane's law firm on Wall Street. Alexander sat at the head of the table, looking bored. He checked his watch. Vane sat next to him, smugness radiating off him like cheap cologne. Robert walked in alone. He wore a cheap suit, ill-fitting and dated. Vane smirked. Mr. Bennett, Vane said, we are prepared to make a generous offer to make this nuisance go away. $2 million. And a condo in Miami for Sophia. In exchange, she signs a statement retracting her accusations and admitting to the accidental fall. Alexander didn't even look up. Take it, old man. It's more money than you've seen in your life. Robert stood silently. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a flash drive. He placed it gently on the mahogany table. I don't want your money, Robert said. I want your life. Not your heartbeat. Your life. Your freedom. Your reputation. Your legacy. Alexander laughed. What is that? Some home movie? It's the footage from the nanny cam, Robert lied smoothly. He didn't have the footage processed yet, but he needed to see them sweat. The one you forgot about, Alex. The one that shows you throwing her down the stairs? The color drained from Alexander's face. Vane sat up straighter, his smile vanishing. That's illegal surveillance, Vane sputtered. Inadmissible. In a criminal trial? Maybe, Robert leaned in. But I'm not just going to the police. I'm going to the board of directors of Kensington Logistics. I'm going to the shareholders. I'm going to the press. By the time I'm done, you won't be a CEO. You'll be a pariah. Robert picked up the flash drive. See you in court, boys. He walked out. It was a bluff, partially. He needed time to crack the encryption on the cloud server. But he had rattled the cage. The lion was awake, and the hunters were starting to get scared. The trial of the people versus Alexander Kensington. Technically a civil suit for damages and assault, as the district attorney was dragging his feet on criminal charges due to lack of evidence, began on a rainy Tuesday in November. The courtroom was packed. Every seat was filled with reporters, socialites, and curious onlookers. The atmosphere was electric. Sophia sat at the plaintiff's table, dressed in a modest grey suit. She looked stronger than she had months ago, but her hands still trembled. Beside her was their attorney, William Sterling, a young, hungry lawyer Robert had recruited because he wasn't part of the old boys club that Vane dominated. But everyone knew who was really running the show. Robert sat directly behind Sophia, his eyes scanning the room, analyzing every juror, every whisper. Charles Vane's opening statement was a masterpiece of character assassination. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Vane purred, pacing the floor. This is not a case about domestic violence. This is a case about extortion. You will hear about a woman who came from nothing, married a prince, and couldn't handle the pressure. You will hear about secret drinking, about mood swings, about a tragic accident that she is now trying to monetize. He pointed a finger at Sophia. She doesn't want justice. She wants a payout. Sophia looked down, tears stinging her eyes. Robert leaned forward and whispered, "Head up. Look him in the eye. If you look down, you look guilty." Sophia forced her chin up, staring daggers at Vane. The first 3 days were a bloodbath. Vane produced experts who testified that Sophia's injuries were consistent with a tumble. He brought out a bartender who claimed he saw Sophia drinking vodka the night of the gala, a man Robert recognized as a low-level gambler who owed debts to the mob, debts likely paid off by Kensington. Then it was Sophia's turn to take the stand. She walked to the witness box, swearing on the Bible. Vane approached her like a shark sensing blood. "Mrs. Kensington," Vane began, "is it true that your mother was institutionalized for hysteria when you were a child?" "Objection!" William shouted. "Relevance! It goes to the witness's state of mind and genetic predisposition to instability," Vane argued smoothly. The judge, a man named Henderson who played golf with Alexander's father, overruled the objection. "My mother had depression," Sophia said, her voice shaking. "She wasn't hysterical. She was sad." "Sad," Vane mocked. "Just like you were sad the night you lost the baby. So sad you had a drink? Maybe two?" "I didn't drink," Sophia cried out. "But you fell. A grown woman, a dancer in her youth, just fell down 3 steps. Doesn't that sound clumsy to you? Or were you so intoxicated you couldn't stand?" "He pushed me," Sophia pointed at Alexander. "He was angry because I embarrassed him. He grabbed my hair. He threw me." "Lies!" Alexander shouted from the defense table, putting on a show of outrage. "Order!" Judge Henderson banged his gavel. "Mrs. Kensington, control your outbursts." Vane smiled. He had what he wanted. She looked emotional, unstable. During the recess, William looked defeated. "Robert, the jury isn't buying it. They see a rich, handsome man and a crying woman. Vane has muddied the waters too much. We need the video." "The encryption is military grade," Robert growled. "My guy is still working on it. We need to buy time." "We don't have time. The defense rests tomorrow. If we don't produce a miracle, we lose." Robert walked out into the hallway. He saw Alexander standing by the water fountain, laughing with a group of reporters. Alexander saw Robert and walked over. "Give it up, Bob," Alexander sneered. "You're out of your league. Go back to fixing carburetors. Sophia is going to lose, and then I'm going to sue you for defamation. I'll take your house. I'll take your pension. You'll die in a gutter." Robert looked at Alexander. For a split second, the violence in Robert's past bubbled up. He wanted to end it right there. But he breathed in. "You think this is a game, Alex," Robert said softly. "You think because you bought the board, the judge, and the witnesses, you've won. But you forgot the one rule of the street." "And what's that?" "Always check the trunk." Robert's phone buzzed. He looked at it. It was a text from his tech contact, simply reading, "Got it." Robert smiled, a cold, terrifying smile that made Alexander step back. "Enjoy your lunch, Alexander. It's your last meal as a free man." Back in the courtroom, the tension was palpable. William stood up. "Your Honor, the plaintiff calls a rebuttal witness. We call Maria Gonzalez." A murmur went through the crowd. Alexander whispered furiously to Vane. Vane looked pale. "She's in Mexico," he hissed. The doors opened. Maria walked in, flanked by 2 federal marshals Robert had called in as a favor. She looked terrified, but determined. She took the stand. "Mrs. Gonzalez," William asked, "where were you on the night of November 14th? "I was in the kitchen, sir." "And what did you hear?" "I heard Mr. Kensington yelling. He was screaming about a business deal. He called Mrs. Kensington. Terrible names." "Did you hear her fall?" "I heard a thud, and a scream, and then silence." "Did you see anything?" "No," Maria said. Vane stood up, looking relieved. "So you didn't see anything. This is hearsay." "Wait," Maria interrupted. "I didn't see the fall, but I saw the video." The courtroom went dead silent. "What video?" William asked. "The nanny cam footage," Maria said clearly. "I saw it on the server before Mr. Vane deleted it." "Objection! There is no video," Vane roared. "Actually," William said, pulling a flash drive from his pocket, the one Robert had just handed him. "There is. We would like to submit Exhibit G into evidence, recovered from the cloud server backup this morning." The judge hesitated. He looked at Alexander, whose face was grey. He had no choice. "Play it." The lights dimmed. The large screens in the courtroom flickered to life. The grainy, high-angle footage showed the living room. It showed Alexander pacing. It showed him kicking the ottoman. It showed Sophia crying, curling away. And then it showed the moment. The gasp in the courtroom was a collective intake of breath. On screen, Alexander grabbed Sophia by the hair. He dragged her to the steps. She begged him to stop. And then, with a vicious, deliberate shove, he pushed her. The video showed her falling. It showed her hitting the table. It showed Alexander standing over her, adjusting his cuffs and making a phone call instead of helping her. The video ended. The silence was deafening. Then, a woman in the back row started crying. Alexander sat frozen. Vane had his head in his hands. Robert looked at the jury. Their faces were masks of horror and disgust. The spell of money was broken. The truth was out, naked and ugly. Sophia began to sob quietly, but these were tears of release. Robert put his hand on her shoulder. "It's over, baby," he whispered. "We got him." But the drama wasn't done. As the judge prepared to adjourn, the doors at the back of the courtroom burst open. It wasn't a witness. It was the district attorney himself, flanked by 4 uniformed officers. "Alexander Kensington," the DA announced, his voice booming. "You are under arrest for aggravated assault, attempted manslaughter, and obstruction of justice." The handcuffs clicked, the cameras flashed, and for the first time in his life, Alexander Kensington looked small. The holding cell at the 19th Precinct was a stark, brutal contrast to the penthouse suite at the Four Seasons, where Alexander Kensington usually spent his difficult nights. There were no Egyptian cotton sheets here, only a steel bench bolted to a concrete floor that smelled of bleach and old despair. Alexander sat on the edge of the bench, his elbows on his knees, staring at the scuffed tips of his Italian leather shoes. They had taken his belt, his tie, and his shoelaces. Suicide precautions, the intake officer had sneered. The indignity of it burned him more than the criminal charges. He was a Kensington. His grandfather had built railroads. His father had built shipping lanes. He was American royalty. "This is a mistake," he muttered to the empty air. "A clerical error. Vane will fix it." But deep down, the ice in his stomach told him otherwise. The video. He closed his eyes, and the image of Sophia falling replayed in his mind. Not the fall itself, he didn't care about that, but the camera angle. How could he have been so stupid? How could he have missed a detail that small? Outside the precinct, the world was eating him alive. The media storm was unprecedented. The hashtag #Justice for Sophia was trending worldwide. News vans from every major network were double-parked down the block, their satellite dishes pointed like accusations at the brick building holding the fallen billionaire. While Alexander stewed in his cell, a different kind of storm was hitting Kensington Tower in Midtown Manhattan. Robert Bennett stood in the lobby, watching the chaos unfold. This time, he wasn't wearing his mechanic's jumpsuit or his ill-fitting court suit. He wore his old FBI windbreaker, a relic from a past life he had buried long ago. Beside him stood Special Agent in Charge Miller, his old partner, whose badge glinted under the fluorescent lights. "We have a federal warrant," Miller shouted over the protests of the Kensington security team. "Step away from the desks Hands where we can see them." Dozens of agents in blue jackets swarmed the lobby, bypassing the turnstiles and heading for the elevators. It was a raid of massive proportions. They weren't just looking for evidence of the assault, they were looking for the money. Robert and Miller took the private elevator to the 40th floor, Alexander's sanctuary. The office was a shrine to ego. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city Alexander believed he owned. The desk was made of imported mahogany, the size of a small car. "He kept it in the floor," Robert said, walking straight to a seemingly seamless section of the parquet flooring beneath a heavy marble statue of Atlas. Old habits die hard. His father taught him never to trust the cloud with the real dirt. Miller signaled 2 agents with crowbars. "Move the statue." With a grinding of stone against wood, Atlas was shoved aside. Robert knelt, tapping the floorboards until he heard a hollow sound. He pulled a small pry bar from his jacket, a mechanic's tool, and popped the panel. Beneath it was a biometric safe. "We need a fingerprint," Miller said, frowning. "Or a code," Robert looked at the keypad. "He's arrogant, Miller, but he's also sentimental about his own power. Try the date he took the company public. July 4th, 2014. Miller punched in 070414. The light blinked red. Robert paused. He thought about the man who beat his daughter. He thought about what mattered most to Alexander. It wasn't the company. It was himself. "Try his own birthday," Robert suggested. "But backwards. He thinks he's a reflection of God." Miller raised an eyebrow but typed the numbers. Click. The heavy steel door hissed open. Inside, stacked in neat rows, were hard drives, ledgers, and passports. Passports with Alexander's face, but different names. "Jackpot," Miller breathed, pulling out a black ledger. He flipped it open. Offshore accounts, shell companies in Panama, bribes to city officials. "Bob, this isn't just assault. This is the biggest corporate fraud case in a decade." Robert didn't smile. He just stared at the evidence of a corrupt life. "He didn't just break my daughter's heart, Miller. He broke the law every day he drew breath. Burn him down. Burn it all down." 3 days passed before Charles Vane came to Rikers Island. Alexander had been moved to the high-security wing. The other inmates had recognized him from the news, and the taunts were endless. "Hey, billionaire, got a stock tip?" When Alexander saw Vane through the plexiglass of the visitation booth, relief washed over him so intensely he almost wept. Vane looked polished, calm, and professional. Alexander picked up the receiver. "Where have you been? Do you know what they're feeding me in here? I want a transfer to minimum security immediately, and I want that judge disbarred for setting no bail." Vane didn't pick up his receiver immediately. He took a slow breath, smoothed his silk tie, and then lifted the phone. "There won't be a transfer, Alex." "Excuse me?" Alexander's eyes bulged. "I am paying you $5,000 an hour to get results, not excuses." "You aren't paying me anything," Vane said, his voice devoid of its usual sycophantic warmth. "Your assets were frozen at 9 a.m. yesterday morning. The SEC, the FBI, the DOJ, they're all involved. The raid on your office gave them everything." Alexander went white. "The safe." "Yes, the safe." Robert Bennett knew exactly where to look. Vane paused, his eyes cold. "I came here to tell you that I have formally withdrawn as your counsel." "You can't do that!" Alexander slammed his fist against the glass. "You're my lawyer. You have privilege. You have to protect me." "I have to protect myself," Vane corrected him. "I looked at the ledgers, Alex. You were funneling money through my firm without my knowledge to pay off your cartels in Mexico. You made me an accomplice." "You knew," Alexander shrieked. "You helped me set it up. And I have just spent the last 12 hours with the district attorney proving that I was a victim of your deception. Vane lied smoothly. "I cut a deal. Full immunity in exchange for testimony regarding your temper and your financial history." The realization hit Alexander like a physical blow. The air left his lungs. Vane wasn't just leaving, he was flipping. The man who knew every skeleton in the Kensington closet was handing the keys to the prosecutor. "Charles," Alexander's voice broke, reducing to a whimper. "Please, we're friends. I'm the godfather of your daughter." Vane stood up. He looked at the broken man in the orange jumpsuit. "You don't have friends, Alexander. You have employees, and you just fired the last one." Vane hung up the phone and walked out of the room, leaving Alexander screaming silently behind the soundproof glass. The sentencing hearing, held 6 months later, was the final act of the tragedy. The courtroom was overflowing. The gallery was packed, not just with press, but with former employees Alexander had fired, people he had ruined, and women's rights groups supporting Sophia. Sophia sat in the front row. She looked different. The fear that had defined her existence for 3 years was gone. She sat with a straight spine, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Next to her, Robert sat like a stone sentinel. When the bailiff announced, "All rise," the room went silent. Judge Martha Halloway entered. She was a woman known for her severity, a jurist who had taken down mob bosses and corrupt senators. She took her seat and looked over her spectacles at the defense table. Alexander sat alone. He had been assigned a public defender, a young, overworked lawyer who clearly wanted to be anywhere else. Alexander looked gaunt. His hair was thinning, his skin pasty from months without sunlight. The golden boy had rusted. "Mr. Kensington," Judge Halloway began, her voice echoing in the wood-paneled room, "you have been found guilty of aggravated assault, obstruction of justice, wire fraud, and money laundering. Do you have anything to say before I pass sentence?" Alexander stood up. His hands were shackled to his waist. He looked at the jury, then at the judge. He tried to summon his old arrogance, the charm that had won him boardroom battles. "I am a job creator," he rasped, his voice thin. "I built an empire. This woman," he gestured vaguely toward Sophia, "was hysterical. It was an accident. I am the victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by her father." A murmur of disgust rippled through the courtroom. Judge Halloway's expression didn't change. She turned her gaze to Sophia. "Mrs. Bennet Kensington," the judge said gently, "would you like to make a victim impact statement?" Sophia stood. She walked to the podium. She didn't bring notes. She didn't need them. "Your Honor," Sophia began, her voice clear and bell-like in the silence. "For 2 years I lived in a house that cost $10 million, but I was poorer than anyone on the street. I was poor in spirit. I was bankrupt of hope." She turned to look directly at Alexander. He tried to meet her gaze but flinched and looked away. "He told me I was nothing without him," Sophia continued. "He told me that his money made him a god. But when he pushed me down those stairs, when he chose to call his lawyer instead of an ambulance while his unborn son died inside me, he showed the world what he really is." She took a deep breath, fighting back the tears. "He is not a god. He is not a titan of industry. He is a small, frightened man who uses violence to feel big. I lost my son, Your Honor. I will never get to hold him. I will never hear his first word. But today, I am asking you to ensure that no other woman ever has to lose a part of herself to Alexander Kensington. I am asking for justice, not for revenge, but for the safety of the future." Sophia returned to her seat. Robert took her hand and squeezed it hard. Judge Halloway nodded slowly. She shuffled her papers and looked down at Alexander. "Alexander Kensington, your statement today shows a complete lack of remorse. You view people as commodities and laws as suggestions. You have used your wealth as a weapon to silence, abuse, and destroy. The judge leaned forward. It is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to 25 years in a federal penitentiary for the financial crimes, to run consecutively with 15 years for the charge of aggravated assault. That is a total of 40 years. Alexander gasped. 40 years. He was 32. He would be an old man when he saw the sky again. Furthermore, the judge continued, the court orders the immediate liquidation of all personal assets, to pay restitution to the shareholders, and a punitive damages award of $50 million to the plaintiff, Sophia Bennett. The gavel slammed down. Bang! The sound was final. It was the sound of a door closing on a life. Two marshals grabbed Alexander by the arms. As they dragged him away, he didn't scream. He looked at Sophia. For the first time, there was no anger in his eyes, only a terrifying realization of his own insignificance. Sophia watched him go. She didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She just let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 3 years. 1 year later. The seasons had changed. The biting cold of the trial had given way to a warm, golden autumn in Michigan. Robert Bennett was in his garage. He was working on the Mustang again, the engine purring like a contented cat. But the garage was different now. It was cleaner. There was a new lift, and in the corner there was a small tricycle. "Dad!" a voice called out. Robert wiped his grease-stained hands and walked out into the sunlight. Sophia was standing by the garden, holding a basket of tomatoes. She looked vibrant. The hollow cheeks were filled out, her eyes bright and alive. She wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. With the settlement money, she had opened The Haven, a shelter and legal aid center for women escaping domestic abuse in high-conflict marriages. She used her experience and her father's connections to help women who were being silenced by powerful husbands. "Miller is here," Sophia said, pointing to the driveway where a black sedan had just pulled up. Former Agent Miller stepped out, looking relaxed in a polo shirt. He held up a bottle of wine. "I heard you were making lasagna, Bob. I brought the cheap stuff." Robert laughed, a rusty booming sound. "Good, because I'm not wasting the good stuff on a Fed." They sat on the back porch as the sun began to set, painting the sky in streaks of violet and fire. The air smelled of drying leaves and tomato sauce. "I saw him," Miller said quietly, after they had eaten. The table went quiet. They knew who he meant. "How is he?" Sophia asked. There was no fear in her voice anymore, only a distant curiosity. "He's working in the laundry," Miller said. "Making 12 cents an hour. He tried to organize a strike last month. Nobody listened to him. He's just inmate 741 now." Sophia nodded. She looked out at the yard. "He's in his cage, and I'm out here." "You're not just out here, kid," Robert said, reaching over to cover her hand with his own. "You're free. Real freedom. The kind you fight for." Sophia squeezed his hand. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad. You came for me when no one else would." "I'm your father," Robert said simply, his voice thick with emotion. "I'd burn the world down twice just to see you smile." Later that evening, after Miller had left, Sophia and Robert drove to the small cemetery on the hill. It was their ritual. The grave of her son was covered in fallen maple leaves. Sophia knelt and gently brushed them away. The stone was warm to the touch. Baby Bennett. She placed a single white rose on the earth. "I'm helping them, little one," she whispered to the wind. "I'm helping the other mommies, so they don't have to be afraid." Robert stood a few feet back, giving her space. He watched his daughter, a warrior in a cardigan, and he felt a peace he hadn't known in decades. The war was over. The dragon was slain, and the princess had become a queen. They walked back to the truck under the canopy of stars. The road ahead was long, but for the first time, it wasn't dark. It was lit by the headlights of an old Ford truck and the unbreakable bond between a father and his daughter. And that is the story of Sophia and Robert, a reminder that money can buy lawyers, mansions, and silence, but it cannot buy the truth. Alexander Kensington thought his wealth made him a god, but he learned the hard way that a father's love for his daughter is a force more powerful than any empire. Sophia didn't just survive. She triumphed, turning her pain into a shield for others. Whatever darkness you are facing, remember, the truth always has a way of coming into the light. If this story moved you, or if you believe that justice should always prevail no matter how rich the villain is, please hit that like button. It helps us share these stories with more people. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and family, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful real-life dramas. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Alexander's sentence was long enough? I'll see you in the next video.